In this series, we will be covering artwork and making stencils, which will include creating a basic original piece of artwork, making clean line drawings, and working from pre-existing artwork, which is flash or photograph or any kind of reference basically that's already done for you. And I'm also going to be covering why it's always better to make your own line drawings for the stencils. Now, while we're on the topic of lines, when you're tracing a drawing or creating your own piece of artwork, it's very important to keep in mind how many lines you have per square inch. Now, what I mean by that is when you're doing a tattoo and you have too many lines that are too close together, just basically packed too tightly into an area, what's going to happen is as the tattoo heals naturally, because it's on skin, which is an organic tissue, it's going to soften up a little bit, and when the lines are too close together, it's going to tend to kind of blur out and become unreadable. So when you're making your line drawings, try to keep the lines relatively spaced apart, not too much, but just enough to where when it heals, it's not going to make a fuzzy mess. I'll explain more about that later in detail. Now, generally, you're going to be working from two different types of reference, and that's basically going to be somebody that has artwork that they bring in with them, like a portrait, like I said, or reference they found somewhere, or a piece of flash they found on the wall. Or the other type is going to be somebody that just has an idea that they want to work off of. When you're working with someone that has just an idea, it's very important to take as many notes as possible, because basically, and there's no two people that are going to come in that want the exact same thing done. So there's going to be a lot of things that are very specific to that person and what they want to get done. So take lots of notes, and that is going to include obviously spelling if they want lettering in there, the type of font they're going to use, etc. So take lots of notes. Also, location is very important too. You have to keep in mind that any given tattoo, the area it's going, you want it to fill the area correctly. For example, if it's going to be on their shoulder or bicep or any spot on their body that has a rounded shape you're working with, you kind of want to accent that particular part of their body. And obviously, there's no two spots in your body that have the same shape. So location is very important. That's going to dictate the general shape and flow of the tattoo. And also, you want it facing the correct way. Now, what I mean by that is if you have a face, a literal face, whether it's an animal or a person or whatever, you want it to flow, to face with the body. Whatever direction that person is facing, you want the tattoo to coincide with that. So if, for example, you're getting a face on your right arm, you want the face generally facing towards you, the direction that you're moving. It's just basically a standard rule of thumb. It just works better. It looks correct. It feels more natural when it's facing that way. Also, it's very important when you're doing the drawing to keep it small. You don't want to do a huge, massive drawing. Even though the piece you're doing might be big, it's better to do the drawing relatively small. Not too small to where you can't see what you're doing, but small enough to fit on a standard size sheet of paper. And the reason behind that is it's very difficult to keep the proportions correct with the size of the piece you're doing if you can't see the entire piece. So when you shrink it down and you're working with a very small piece, you can see all the proportions right next to each other, and it's very easy to keep it all correct and looking correct. And when you're done with that, you just throw it in the copying machine and blow it up to whatever size you're working with, if that's necessary. Sometimes it might work fine the size it is. Also, drawing material is important too. When you're doing the drawing, always use a regular pencil with an eraser, so that way any changes you need to make, you can do them right there on the spot. It goes much quicker that way. And after the drawing is okay and everything is good to go, you need to make a line drawing of that, because what happens if you try to make a stencil based directly on a piece of artwork or a photograph or whatever with coloring and shading and all that in it, you're going to have a lot of excess stencil material on their skin, and when you're tattooing and your hands are rubbing it and you're wiping, it's going to basically make a big blurry mess, and it's very hard to tattoo and work with that. So when you simplify it and just break it down just to the outline, you have very little stencil material on their skin, and you have less to mess up, basically. So always make nice, clean, simple line drawings. Keep them as simple as possible. The less variables you put into anything, the less chances you're going to have to mess it up. And I will be moving on and demonstrating to you exactly what I'm talking about.